From the cliffs beyond Thornhollow, the smoke had looked like a second sunset, thick, coiling, devouring the stars. Her family's estate, House Valecrest, had gone up like dry kindling, screams swallowed by flame, stone cracking, banners collapsing into ash. And somewhere in the chaos, a dragon's roar had rolled across the valley, low, furious, victorious. They said no one survived. They were wrong. 3 years later, Amy pressed her back to the cold bones of Thornhollow Castle and listened to the man who ruled it breathe in his sleep. The castle rose from black rock like something carved from a nightmare. Spires twisted as though grown instead of built, windows narrow as watchful eyes. Forest pressed close on all sides, ancient and enchanted, its trees whispering secrets in a language older than crowns. Above, floating shards of shattered islands drifted lazily in the night sky, glowing faintly with trapped starlight. Amy had not meant to stay. She had crawled into the hidden passages bleeding, delirious, half wild with grief. She had meant to hide for a night. 2 years later, she knew every corridor, every loose stone, every rhythm of Castian Vale's steps as he crossed the courtyard at dawn. Lord of Thornhollow, dragon in human skin. She had watched him kneel beside an injured stable boy, watched him refuse cruel taxes from the crown, watched him stand alone on the highest battlement, staring toward the horizon where her home once stood. He carried power like iron chains, loneliness like armor. Amy told herself she hated him, but hatred did not feel like this. Hatred did not ache when he looked tired. Hatred did not whisper his name in the dark. He had known for 6 months. Castian stood barefoot in his kitchen at midnight, shirt unlaced, dark hair loose over his shoulders. The hearth embers glowed low, the scent of bread and ash hung in the air. "I know you're there," he said softly. Amy froze inside the passage behind the pantry wall. She could leave, vanish, wait another week. But something in his voice, tired, not angry, unraveled her. Stone scraped. She stepped out, barefoot, scarred, thin as a winter branch, a knife clutched in trembling fingers. He did not move. His eyes, gold in the firelight, locked onto her. "You're not a ghost," he murmured. "No," she said hoarsely. "I'm worse." He studied her, the bruises, the old burn scars along her shoulder, the fury in her posture. "You've been stealing my bread. You have too much of it." A corner of his mouth twitched. She hated that. "Why my castle?" he asked. Because it was strong. Because dragons did not fear other dragons. Because she had nowhere left. Because she had watched him and seen mercy. She said none of it. "I needed walls." Silence stretched. He stepped closer. The air shifted, warmer, heavier. She felt it then, the hum beneath his skin, ancient, coiled, dragon. "If I wanted you gone," he said quietly, "you would be." She lifted her chin. "Then do it." He held her gaze, then he stepped aside. "There is a door," he said. "You don't have to live in my walls." Her throat burned. He was offering her something she hadn't had since the fire. Choice. She should have run. Instead, she stayed. And the castle changed that night. The first night she slept in a real bed, Amy did not sleep at all. The mattress was too soft, the sheets too clean, the silence too honest. She lay staring at the canopy while moonlight spilled silver across the stone floor. Somewhere beyond the window, Thornhollow's forest murmured. Magic threaded through the trees like breath. The floating islands drifted overhead, their undersides glowing faint blue, casting shifting shadows across the castle walls. Freedom felt dangerous. In the morning, she found Castian in the courtyard. He stood stripped to the waist, blade in hand, sparring against 3 armored guards at once. Steel rang, sparks flew. He moved with controlled violence, precise, ruthless, almost beautiful. He disarmed one man, then another. The third lunged. Castian caught the blade with his bare hand. The steel hissed against his skin. He did not bleed. The guard fell back, pale. Amy's breath stilled. Dragon. He sensed her watching. His gaze lifted, found her in the balcony archway. Heat flared between them. Not magic. Something worse. Later, in the library, he approached her where she pretended to read. "You know what I am," he said. "Yes." "And yet you stayed." She closed the book. "I've seen worse monsters." Something flickered across his face. Hurt or fury. "You think I burned your house." The words hit like a blade. She rose slowly. "Did you?" "No." She searched his eyes. They were gold in shadow, honest, and hiding something. "If I find proof otherwise," she said softly, "I will kill you." His mouth curved, not amused. "I would expect nothing less." The tension between them sharpened. Wariness, attraction, a spark too dangerous to name. And somewhere beyond the forest, unseen eyes watched Thornhollow with patient hunger. The first time she saw him shift, it was an accident. A rider arrived at dusk, bleeding, half-conscious. "Northwatch," the man gasped. "Burned by royal decree." Amy felt the word like ice. Burned. Castian went still. Something inside him snapped. The courtyard air thickened. The sky darkened, though the sun had not yet set. His spine arched, muscles straining as if his skin could not contain him. "Inside," he ordered. She didn't move. She watched. Bones cracked. Light burst from beneath his skin. And then, wings. Massive. Obsidian and molten gold. They tore through fabric and air alike. His body surged, lengthened, expanded into something vast and terrible. A dragon crouched where the man had stood. Ancient, regal, furious. The ground trembled under his claws. His head turned toward her. For a heartbeat, she saw fear there, not of her, of himself. Then he launched skyward, wings shattering the silence. The floating islands shifted in his wake as he soared toward the horizon, toward smoke rising in the north. Amy stood shaking. He hadn't burned her home, but something had. And now the crown was torching villages. Patterns emerged in her mind. A memory surfaced of a man watching her father argue in a torchlit hall. Of cold, calculating eyes. Lord Malrek Thorn, advisor to the king, architect of wars. She whispered the name to the wind. If Malrek had ordered Veilcrest destroyed, then this was not over. And she was not done surviving. Castian returned before dawn. Smoke clung to his skin. Blood streaked his jaw. Human again. Amy waited in the great hall. "You're hurt," she said. "Not mine." He poured wine but did not drink. "The crown is cleansing border houses," he said quietly. "Anyone suspected of dragon alliances." Veilcrest had no dragon alliances. "I know." The words were steady, certain. She stepped closer. "How?" He hesitated. Then, "Because I investigated after it burned." Her heart stumbled. "Why would you care?" His jaw tightened. "Because you were a child." Silence. He had known her name all this time. "You found nothing," she said. "I found interference, orders signed under the king's seal, but drafted by another hand." "Malrek." "Yes." The name felt poisonous. Castian looked at her carefully. "He wanted something your father refused to give." Amy's pulse roared. "There was an artifact," she whispered, "a relic bound to our bloodline." His eyes sharpened. "Where is it?" "Gone." Not entirely true. She had taken it the night of the fire. A small crystal orb, warm as a heartbeat, hidden in the deepest chamber of Thornhollow's forgotten vault. She did not trust him enough yet. He stepped closer. "You are not safe here anymore," he said softly. She laughed, bitter. "I was never safe anywhere." His hand brushed her wrist. The contact was brief, electric. "If Malrek believes you alive," he said, voice low, "he will come." "Let him." Fire flared in her chest. Castian looked at her like she was both weapon and wound. "I will not let him touch you," he said. The promise sounded like a vow, and vows from dragons were dangerous things. They began training together. At first, it was strategy. Maps spread across war tables, candlelight flickering over borders and supply routes. Castian teaching her how to read troop movement like poetry. "You see," he murmured behind her shoulder, "he pushes fear before soldiers." She felt his breath against her ear, too close. "Then we strike the fear," she replied. Later, it became combat. He placed a dagger in her palm, adjusted her grip, his hands over hers. "Lower," he said softly. Her pulse thundered. "Focus." "I am." Not on the blade. They circled each other in the courtyard at dusk. She lunged. He caught her wrist, twisted, pinned her against stone. Their bodies collided, breath mingled. His eyes shifted, gold deepening toward molten amber. "You are reckless," he murmured. "You're afraid." "Of what?" she swallowed. "Of wanting something you think you don't deserve." The words slipped out, his grip tightened. "You presume much." She tilted her chin. "Prove me wrong." For a heartbeat, he almost kissed her. She saw it, the hunger, the restraint cracking. Then he stepped back abruptly. "I am not safe for you." Her chest ached. "I didn't ask you to be safe." Storm clouds gathered above Thornhollow. Thunder rolled, and somewhere in the forest below, riders gathered in secret. Malrek had found her, and he was coming. The attack came at night. Shadows danced in the moonlight, twisting between the trees of the dense forest surrounding the fortress. Torches bloomed like falling stars in the darkness, flickering wildly as if the very air were alive with fire. The shrill blare of horns pierced the night, echoing through the valley with the promise of death. The gates trembled beneath the weight of siege engines, massive wooden structures groaning under the pressure of the attackers. Amy stood beside Castian on the battlements, wind whipping her hair into her face, tugging at her cloak. Her hands gripped the stone railing, knuckles white, but her eyes were steady, sharp. 200 at least, she said, her voice taut with fear and defiance. The sight of so many soldiers armed and advancing made her stomach tighten, but she refused to look away. More behind, Castian replied, his gaze following the endless tide of enemies creeping forward from the tree line, the shadows of their armor glinting under the torchlight. He turned to her, eyes resolute. This is my fight. No, Amy said firmly, placing a hand on his arm. It's ours. Her words were a tether, a lifeline in the chaos. His hand found hers, fingers brushing against each other just once, a fleeting promise of trust and unity in the storm of violence. Then he leapt. Mid-air, the form he had concealed shifted, wings erupting from his back in a burst of scale and muscle. Fire followed him like a comet streaking across the night sky. The battlefield below became an inferno. The sky itself seemed to explode with wings and flame as Castian descended upon Malrek's army like judgment incarnate. Siege towers splintered, catapults were hurled aside, and men scattered in panic, their screams swallowed by the roar of dragonfire. Amy ran below, heart hammering, boots pounding against the cobblestones slick with ash and blood. Smoke curled around her, thick and choking, stinging her eyes and lungs. Chaos ruled the battlefield. Arrows clanged against armor, men shouted, and the acrid smell of fire filled her senses. Yet she did not hesitate. She had a path, a purpose, and nothing else mattered. Through the carnage, she found him, Malrek. The sorcerer stood near the forest edge, cloaked and untouched, a phantom amid destruction. His eyes locked onto hers, cold and calculating, measuring. So, he said, his voice calm, almost casual amidst the chaos. The last veil. Rage swallowed her fear. Her fingers tightened around the hilt of her blade. You burned my family, she spat, voice trembling with fury. For progress, he replied smoothly, as if her grief were irrelevant. Dragons must kneel. Your father refused to reveal the relic. His hands moved in subtle, practiced gestures, and the air around them seemed to darken. Amy drew her blade, steel gleaming in the torchlight. The tension between them crackled like lightning. Malrek smiled, a slow, cruel curl of his lips. Magic surged from his hands, dark, twisting, cruel. The force hit her chest like a battering ram, hurling her back across the scorched earth. Pain exploded through her ribs, breath torn from her lungs, but she forced herself to rise, eyes locked on the sorcerer. He approached slowly, savoring each step as if the delay made the moment sweeter. Give me the artifact, he said softly, voice smooth and commanding. Or watch your dragon die. Above, Castian roared, a sound of fury and defiance, but then faltered. Chains of black energy, writhing and alive, wrapped around his wings, dragging him down toward the earth. Amy's heart stopped. No, she whispered, the word barely carrying over the roar of fire and battle. Malrek extended his hand, the power in his palm radiating menace. Choose. Amy's fingers closed around the hidden crystal at her throat. It pulsed, warm and alive, resonating with a force she could feel deep in her bones. It had waited for this moment, and she could sense its will. She could hear the faint hum of energy vibrating through the air, almost pleading, almost guiding. She made her choice. With a sharp, decisive motion, she shattered it against the ground.
The relic exploded in a burst of light and sound, a final defiance against the darkness. Silence fell, heavy and absolute, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the dying crackle of distant fires.
Light consumed the battlefield. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't warm. It was a searing, brilliant blaze that spilled across the shattered earth, crawling over toppled banners and twisted weapons, reflecting off battered armor. Soldiers shielded their eyes as the radiance surged, blinding and brilliant. White and gold intertwined in a relentless brilliance, sharp as lightning, yet fluid as water. The relic did not shatter. It resisted the chaos, resisting the fear and the clamor. Instead, it unfolded. Slowly at first, then with sudden, overwhelming force. Power erupted outward in a wave that knocked soldiers flat, throwing them like rag dolls across the mud and stone. The dark chains that had bound Castian dissolved into dust, vanishing as though they had never existed. He crashed to the ground with a resounding thud, free at last. His breaths came harsh and uneven, each one trembling with a mix of shock and relief. Amy stood at the epicenter, bathed in the radiant glow. The crystal that had summoned this storm dissolved into threads of light, not breaking but unraveling, spilling energy that wrapped around her skin like living fire. It was both beautiful and terrifying, warm yet searing, as if it had a mind of its own, attuning to her very being. Malrek staggered backward, his eyes wide with disbelief. The lines of arrogance and cruelty etched into his face faltered for the first time. "What have you done?" His voice cracked, a hiss of frustration and awe tangled together. Amy felt it then, deep in her bones, a resonance, a truth she had not fully understood until this moment. The relic was never meant to be wielded by a single person. It was meant to awaken, to stir something that had lain dormant for generations. Her bloodline, bound to the relic and to this moment, had always been guardians of dragonkind, not rulers, not conquerors. Balance, harmony, these were the charges entrusted to them. Energy surged through her veins, ancient and unstoppable, intertwining with her blood, her heartbeat, her very essence. It was a harmony that radiated outward, calming, commanding, alive. The battlefield seemed to bend to it, the clatter of armor, the cries of soldiers, even the roar of distant cannons felt muted under its weight. Castian rose slowly behind her, shedding the remnants of his monstrous form, returning to human shape. Despite the chaos, despite the devastation, he stood tall and commanding, yet there was a softness in his eyes as they locked on her. He looked at her not with love, not merely with respect, but with reverence, as though she were something divine, something ancient that had returned to claim its rightful place. Malrek lunged. Castian was there before the motion even fully resolved, intercepting him with a clash of steel that rang like thunder. Magic flared around the blades, sparks dancing in patterns that almost seemed deliberate. The force of their collision sent shockwaves through the battlefield, knocking loose stones and shaking the ground beneath them. Amy stepped forward. The power, the threads of light, of fire, of something older than memory, responded to her instinct, her will. They swirled around her, forming a barrier, a command. "Enough," she said. Her voice, though quiet, carried through the tumult with unnatural authority. The word itself resonated, vibrating through the air. Malrek froze mid-strike, the motion of his arm suspended as though time itself had caught him. Fear, genuine and raw, touched his face for the first time. "This changes nothing," he hissed, his voice trembling despite his effort to mask it. "The crown will hunt you both." "Let them," she replied, each syllable precise,
unshakable, imbued with the calm certainty of someone who now understood her role. Steel rang. Castian drove his blade through Malrek's chest, and the world seemed to exhale. Silence fell over the battlefield like a blanket, heavy and absolute. Smoke curled lazily into the sky, now breaking, revealing streaks of pale blue as morning light began to pierce through the haze. Soldiers, those who survived, fled, stumbling and scrambling, leaving the ground littered with debris and the remnants of conflict. Amy swayed, the surge of energy ebbing, leaving her knees weak, her vision flickering as the threads of light retreated. Castian was there in an instant, catching her before she could collapse. His hands were trembling, strong yet gentle, as if he feared she might burn through him as well. "You're burning," he whispered, his voice breaking with worry and awe. She looked up at him, their eyes meeting in a shared understanding, a mirrored reflection of power and vulnerability. "So are you," she said, and their foreheads touched, the contact electric and grounding, a silent acknowledgement that they had survived, that they had shifted the tide of war together. The battlefield around them was quiet now, but the war itself was far from over. They stood in the center of destruction and light, guardians awakened, bonded by fire and blood, knowing that the next challenge would test them in ways neither could yet imagine.
She woke in his chambers. The dawn light filtered through the tall, narrow windows, casting slanted golden beams across the cold stone floor. The castle was quiet. Rebuilding had begun, but in this room, the workmen's hammers and the echo of repairs were distant murmurs, muted by heavy walls and the lingering weight of exhaustion. Castian sat beside her bed, the chair angled just so, as if he feared she might vanish if he looked away. His presence was steady, anchored, both a comfort and a warning. His eyes, dark and sharp, followed her every motion, betraying a vigilance that did not fully relax even now. "You nearly killed yourself," he said, his voice low, almost a growl tempered by concern. "You nearly let him," she shot back, the memory of what had happened clawing at the edges of her mind. Even now, the taste of smoke and magic lingered, sharp as iron, reminding her of the peril she had walked through. His jaw tightened, muscles coiling beneath his skin. She could see the restraint in his posture, the way his hands gripped the arm of the chair as if he had to remind himself he wasn't still on that battlefield with her. She pushed herself upright, carefully, testing her strength. The sheets slid down her arms, revealing the faint bruises and the long scar along her shoulder, a pale line against her skin. "The relic is gone," she said, a hint of relief in her tone, though she had learned caution. "No," he said softly, leaning closer, his voice almost reverent. "It's in you." She paused, letting the words settle. She could feel it now, a low hum beneath her heartbeat, steady, measured, not overwhelming, integrated. The power had not consumed her. It had merged with her essence, a strange, living rhythm that pulsed with possibility. "You're bound to dragon magic," he murmured, almost more to himself than to her. His gaze held a mix of awe and disbelief. "No human has survived that." She met his gaze steadily, unafraid. "I'm not just human," she said. Something unspoken passed between them then. Gratitude for survival, wonder at the miracle of it. Desire, quietly, tenderly, threading its way through the tension that had always simmered beneath their interactions. He reached for her slowly, his movements careful, deliberate, giving her time to pull away if she wished. She didn't. His fingers traced the scar along her shoulder, gentle, respectful, but with a weight that spoke of the battles they had endured together and the walls they had both let fall for each other. "I would have burned the world for you," he admitted, the honesty in his voice raw, stripped of any pride or pretense.
Her breath caught. The words were dangerous and intoxicating, sparking embers in her chest she had long tried to smother. "Then don't," she whispered, her voice soft but unwavering. "Stay." The word held more than geography. It was a tether, a plea, an offer, a challenge all at once. He understood, the subtle shift in his expression saying more than words ever could. His lips brushed hers, tentative at first, testing boundaries, seeking permission. Then deeper, more certain, claiming yet careful. Heat flared between them, a fire that was not destructive but affirming, a warmth that anchored them both to the moment. For once, neither pulled away. Time stretched and contracted, irrelevant to the fragile bloom of connection taking root. Outside the window, the wind whispered through the castle towers, carrying the scent of smoke and earth, a reminder that the world outside was scarred, but not defeated. Thorn Hollow stood battered, yet unbroken. Its walls bore the marks of war, its towers scarred, but it still held, a testament to resilience. Inside, something equally fragile and vital had begun, woven from trust, relief, and something more primal, more insistent. But beyond the mountains, the world was not at peace. Banners bearing the royal crest were already marching, their movement precise, inevitable. And dragons across the realm had felt the relics awakening, their awareness sparking a silent ripple through the skies. They were stirring, watching, waiting. The hum within her chest pulsed in sync with the distant calls of dragons, a reminder that even in moments of intimacy and fragile peace, the currents of destiny flowed inexorably forward. She drew a slow breath, feeling the weight of power and responsibility, of love and desire, all mingling into a force that was hers to command. Castian held her hand in his, eyes locked on hers, a silent promise of loyalty and protection. In that instant, the scars of battle, the threat of war, and the lingering fear of the unknown faded into the edges of the room. For now, there was only this, the hum of magic, the heat of touch, and the fragile beginnings of something unbreakable.
Weeks passed. Repairs continued. Whispers spread. Some called her flame-bound. Others called her threat. Castian stood at the highest tower beside her as dawn broke over Thorn Hollow. "You could leave," he said quietly. "Find somewhere quieter." She smiled faintly. "You'd follow." "Yes." Honest. Always. She studied the horizon. Smoke rose in the far distance, not from Thorn Hollow, from another house, another cleansing. "The crown won't stop," she said. "No. And neither will the dragons." He looked at her carefully. "You've changed their balance." A distant roar echoed across the sky, not his, another, closer. Amy felt the magic within her respond, like a heartbeat answering another. Castian stiffened. "That," he said slowly, "is not friendly." A shadow crossed the sun, massive, ancient, larger than any dragon she had seen. It circled once above Thorn Hollow, testing, judging. Amy stepped forward to the battlement edge. "Do you trust me?" she asked. "With my life." "Good." She lifted her chin and let the power within her rise, not as weapon, as invitation. The sky seemed to hold its breath. The great dragon descended, not attacking, landing, eyes like molten suns fixed on her, The realm was changing, and she stood at its center. Castian's hand found hers. Together they faced the unknown, and somewhere deep within her chest, the relic's echo whispered, "This is only the beginning."